It's a brand new season here on the American Huddle. We're so excited to be back with you alongside college football analyst Andy Gresh. I'm Haley Out, and we're ready to talk some football. Andy, how pumped are you to be back here in the studio talking American football?
I mean, it's fantastic. The air conditioning is awesome, so we're not in a full-blown schwitz, and there was a lot of great action in week one to be able to digest, and another year of the American is off and running.
Well, a perfect week to stay inside, soak in that AC, because there was a whole lot of football to watch, especially across the American. Andy, what were the biggest statements made in week one in this conference?
Well, I think you look at what UCF did and the fact that they were able to pick up right where they left off from Scott Frost. They transitioned to a new coaching staff. You never would have known it with the way they played. You know, I thought some individual players jumped out. I know we're going to get to my favorite guy down in Houston a little bit later on, but the way that Houston played their great second half, and I think just, Haley, for the most part, the overall competitiveness. You know, we saw a P6 win by Cincinnati. We saw Tulane really hang in there against the Wake Forest group. And, you know, we talked in media days about P6 and year 6 for the American. You get to that point to where you're now more competitive across the board, and I think that's what we're learning more and more, is that there are no weeks off in the American and League, and when it comes to crossover games with teams in other conferences, they need to be ready to go. They can't take anybody lightly.
You mentioned UCF, and they got the college football started in the American last Thursday night at UConn, and quarterback Mackenzie Milton is a player that has a whole lot of buzz surrounding him. Andy, what did Mackenzie Milton do to strengthen his Heisman campaign?
Well, just the control of the offense, Haley, and the way he was able to go out there and be the maestro. You know, he never looked flummoxed, he never looked out of rhythm, he never looked out of sync, and we see the ability for him to control the ground game as well with his legs, and it's more than just getting out of the pocket. They had legitimate design runs for Mackenzie Milton. His ability to throw the football is at a fantastic level. And here's the other thing about Milton, too, is that when you look at him, I think there are going to be some people who will look at him and say, what, that guy? Because he really is 5'11", but he competes like a guy who is an NBA or a 7-footer out there. And that's what jumps off the page to Mackenzie Milton. His compete level, he almost drags his teammates along with him at times whenever they get into a rut.
Milton making a strong statement in week one, and I'm very proud of you for holding back on
going on it's tough.
About your favorite guy, Ed Oliver from Houston, the defensive tackle. And, you know, this bobblehead here, this has been sent out across the country in an effort to keep strengthening Oliver's campaign. And in week one, 13 tackles, which, Andy, was an American Conference record in the first week of the football season. So if he can hold that pace, is he going to end up in New York at the end of the season?
If he does, he will, Haley. Holding that pace will be very difficult because he's an interior defensive lineman. They can double team him at that first level. I mean, watching him just whip people around. I mean, you look at the highlights, and it's more than just a guy who's got the ability to just knock people off of his body. Ed Oliver is a straight up the field defensive lineman. He can play in the middle, which is difficult to deal with because if you're a center, you're trying to deal with him one-handed, and that's almost impossible. He is a penetrating defensive lineman, but when he gets his hands on people, he doesn't miss. You see some defensive tackles who'll kind of reach out a little bit and they'll let a guy run by him. Not Ed Oliver. He eats him up like the Cookie Monster, and he was dominant in week one.
When you were in college, did you have anything sent out around the country like this?
Yeah, it was,
little Andy Gresh face.
No, you know what it was? It was me sitting at a dinner table, and they were like, don't let that fat guy in.
There it is, week one, the fat guy joke.
There we go.
We love it. All right, moving on. Let's talk emerging quarterbacks in the American. A team we haven't touched on yet is Memphis. They come up with a big win against Mercer in week one, and the Tigers, they didn't miss a beat in week one. Brady White at the helm, at the quarterback position. How important was it to replace Riley Ferguson in week one?
Well, think about it. They go from Paxton Lynch to Riley Ferguson, and then the line just keeps on moving. And you don't want to say that it's like a soda machine theory where you go and you press a button and another one pops out, because it isn't that easy. But I think Mike Norvell has done a good job of saying, hey, listen, this is my offense. Here's how we run it. And they found the athletes to be able to do it. Now, to put in perspective, Mercer is not the best opponent. So next week we'll see Memphis have their mettle tested a little bit more. But it was a good first week. And what they did do, Haley, was they whipped their tail in the first half. And when you have an opponent where it's so one-sided, you want to know that the FBS team, which of course in this case is Memphis, you want to know that they can be elite. They go out and they just chew up opponents that are beneath them, and that's exactly what happened in Memphis.
Let's talk about USF, because another big question mark heading into this season was replacing former quarterback Quinton Flowers. How crucial was it that Blake Barnett was able to step into those shoes and keep the pace for the Bulls?
Haley, I thought that opening touchdown, or the touchdown in the first quarter down the right sideline, gave him the confidence that he needed to then get rolling within this offense. And, you know, we know that Charlie Strong, I mean, it was a coup for USF to be able to get Charlie Strong. And the fact that they've been able to sort of pick up where they've left off, I know Coach, we know Charlie. I mean, he's never going to be completely happy until they're raising a championship trophy. But they were competitive, and I thought that touchdown pass down the right sideline, that said everything in terms of the confidence at the quarterback spot. Because when you have a quarterback that's confident, you're going to have 10 other guys that are going to play confident.
Let's move on and talk about Cincinnati. You mentioned the Power 6 win on the road in the Rose Bowl against UCLA, and we originally, to start the game, saw a familiar face at the quarterback position in Hayden Moore. But then just before halftime, freshman Desmond Ridder comes in, leads Cincinnati back into this game offensively. How important was it for Luke Fickell's team to make this statement in week 1?
Yeah, and I think playing two quarterbacks with Moore and Ridder makes the statement even louder, because it's, hey, I got a veteran that I know that I can put in there, and you're not going to see the old proverbial streak go down the leg, but we have an electrifying freshman who could come in and make some plays and learn and grow. So I think to go on the road and do that against a UCLA team who, yeah, transitioned at head coach, come on, there's a lot of talent out there. That's a great P6 win for Luke Fickell in Cincinnati at this point. They got to start stacking those up. And I think we know this, that there's a lot of pressure around college football. But I think with what's going on in football in the state of Ohio right now, Cincinnati has the opportunity to capture the attention of a lot of diehard football fans who are maybe on the fringe in terms of, well, I like college football, but I don't know who I really like. They have a chance to be exciting. They got a coach that people know in the state. That's a big win for Cincinnati.
The battle for the victory bell this weekend. Who do you expect to see get that start? Is it the veteran or is it the freshman?
I think you got to go Moore, and I know that they made the change and they won the game, but I still think at this point you go with the older, more established player. And look, Moore's a really good quarterback now. Let's not take anything away from him, but to me, it's got to be an extreme, Haley, to where Moore either completely plays so terrible that you have to put the young guy in, or that Ridder plays so unbelievable that you can't deny him being on the football field. I still think right now they're still in the middle of that whole situation, and I would expect Moore to get the start, but there's no question Ridder's going to play.
Teams learn a lot about themselves in week 1, and for Tulane, they ended their season in heartbreak, and they began it in heartbreak, losing in overtime to Wake Forest. How does Willie Fritz's group regroup here for week 2?
Well, it's not a terrible loss, and I think you got to put that into perspective, that that's a Group 6 loss. That's a team that is in a league where it's tough for them to even be bowl eligible. So I think we need to realize that the opponent was pretty doggone good, and for Willie Fritz, you can see it building, right? Like, we've talked about Tulane here for a while, it feels like, and you know there's athletes on the field. I thought defensively they were very competitive, and they'll figure it out offensively. That's Willie Fritz's side of the ball. You know, they're different than the service academies who run the option in that you prepare more for that triple option. It's a little more tackle to tackle, whereas with Willie Fritz, you don't know what's going to happen. There are guys running jet sweeps. There are quarterbacks that are getting out of the pocket. You know, they're flipping the ball to people that you think they normally wouldn't. So I think offensively they'll figure it out. Defensively, they were pretty good. I just blame those uniforms. Well, I don't know where in the world those things came from, for crying out loud.
They're hip. They're hip.
Okay, cool. You know what? Then I guess I'm an old fart then at 43 years old, because I was like, wait a minute, that is not the Tulane that I know. But I really do think, Haley, they're going to be good this year.
What the kids are wearing these days.
Oh,
right,
boy.
Andy? All right. Moving on, let's talk about Temple, a team that had high expectations heading into this season. Jeff Collins, year 2 at the helm, and Frankie Juice at the quarterback position,
right.
But a tough loss to Villanova Villanova at home, and in large part, special teams kept them in this game.
Yeah, very much so. Frankie had very little juice, as did that Temple offense, and it was a blocked field goal return for a touchdown that really kept them in that game against Villanova. And look, my expectations for Temple are higher. I'm sure Jeff Collins would tell us the exact same thing if he were here, that he's really disappointed in that loss. Now, unlike Mercer, where they're a little down that FCS totem pole, Villanova at the FCS level is a really good team. You know, it's a battle of Philadelphia. There's a lot of, there's a lot of extra angst, I guess, maybe. Temple has everything to lose and nothing to gain in a situation like that. But offensively, they just didn't get it done. And defensively, I thought they were competitive. This kid, Zach Bednarsik, the quarterback for Villanova, is pretty good. So I thought he tested the Temple defense, but just overall a disappointing performance. You would think at home, rivalry game, pumped and jacked, come out flying, and they came out kind of flat.
ECU and SMU, two other teams that experienced some tough losses to start the season. What do these teams take away from week one? There's still a lot of season left to go. What do they take away?
Well, with ECU, they know that NCAA and T are pretty good because it's the third year that they beat an FBS opponent. So, you could look at it and say that's not a terrible loss, but we know that the clock is ticking at ECU. They're looking for some results this year. So for ECU, you can't get down. Like that loss can't devastate them to the point to where they can't continue to move forward, because we've seen Scotty Montgomery bring in a lot of athletes down there. And then with SMU, it's a situation where Sonny Dykes comes in, and I think that even though there are some things that translate with what Chad Morris did down there, you need a lot of wide receivers, and Sonny Dykes is used to playing in leagues, Haley, where you're thrown it 50, 60 times a game, and that's really not the American unless you're getting into a shootout with, say, a Memphis or a Houston or someone like that. So I think it's a big adjustment going on at SMU, bigger than people think, and that contributed to what happened on what was, I don't want to say it was borderline devastating, but that was a really tough loss for them, because I think they know they can be good down there. They just haven't been able to crack the code yet.
Well, both SMU and ECU will need to quickly put week one out of their minds, as they have two big in-state rivalries this weekend. ECU hosts UNC, and then SMU heads to TCU for a Friday night game. So hopefully we'll see both of those teams get back into it. But lastly, I want to talk about Navy. They took a very lengthy trip out to Hawaii. Saw a very good Hawaii team. We saw all three quarterbacks in the game. So many things to learn. What did you take away from Navy in week one?
What I took away was the slow start really hurt them, but otherwise I thought they were relatively competitive against a Hawaii team that is going to be better at the end of the year than people expect. They're going to sneak up on a lot of college football pundits. But look, I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses, but what I want to do is maybe add some perspective. So you're flying all the way out there. We know that in terms of naval bases in this country, Hawaii, there's a lot of them. So you have to think that there was some, for lack of a better term, pomp and circumstance, that some of their attention may have been a little divided because of the bases they could go visit. And we know that Coach Kenny Amatololo, is one of those guys who wants to teach his athletes more than just about football. And maybe the whole thing just became too much for them right now. I know they played all three of their quarterbacks against Hawaii, so maybe they're searching for some answers. I firmly believe that it's more about the circumstances, and the team they played will be better at the end of the year than people imagine. So we may look back on that and say, okay, now I understand what was going on there. Hawaii's pretty doggone good. I still believe in Navy.
Huge game for Navy this weekend as they take on Memphis, a game that come the end of the season ultimately could decide the West Division champion. So Navy will look to get back home and bounce back from a week one loss. But Andy, the good, the bad, the ugly, the wins, the losses, what was your biggest takeaway from week one?
My biggest takeaway is the competitiveness of the league and the fact that UCF, I think, has the ability to maybe be that American team to crash the party this year. And I'm talking about, given where they're ranked, if they just continue to beat the teams on their schedule and they can be 8-0, 9-0, I think we're going to be talking about a team that may be as ranked as high as the top 5. And if that's the case, then we can start to allow ourselves to think about college football playoff relative to UCF. And to me, that's the big takeaway. Like, I believe in Navy. We'll see how good Memphis is. I was on their defense last year, and they played a team that really couldn't score against them. So I want to see where Memphis is defensively. But for me, it's that UCF group and the fact that Mackenzie Milton looked fantastic against UConn Thursday.
It is so great to have college football back. I can't speak for everybody else at home, but we're happy to have you back here in the studio.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you, and this is awesome. I love it. It's going to be a great year in the American. And again, Haley, I really think UCF has a chance to cause some waves in college football, and that's exactly what the American could use right now in year 6.
Well, for you at home, we are going to have 2 episodes per week of the American Huddle. We're going to recap the week previously as well as look ahead. So be sure to join us back here on Thursday night as we look ahead to week 2 action. On behalf of Andy Gresh, I'm Haley Otten. We'll see you back here on Thursday.